Awesome. Hello, and welcome everyone to Bird Eye Live, the show dedicated to the digital transformation of local businesses everywhere. I am your host, Justin Meredith, and digital marketing evangelist here at Bird Eye. And this show is about learning from industry experts about the how and the why for taking your business online and claiming the most valuable real estate on the internet, that first page of Google. And to help with that, we've provided a link in the caption of the stream, and that takes you to a recording of our last webinar where we had the privilege of hosting Steve Wiedemann and Ben Fisher, two awesome leading rock star, super smart guys in the world of SEO. In that webinar, we dive into how to use your Google Business Profile and how to make that work for you, how to use that to build the strongest possible online reputation that you can for your business. It's a great webinar. We opened the floor to questions from the audience, and they were able to ask Ben and Steve their questions, and we were able to get some really great insight from them. And so, if you haven't had a chance to see that, go ahead and check it out. The link should be in the caption of this post, and you can find it on our website as well. It is also the first episode of our local search expert series. So if you like that one, be sure to stay tuned and follow us along because we will be posting more. We're going to have a lot more episodes of this series where we pick the brains of the brightest SEO minds and we try to find ways to help your business be the best that it can be online. Now, today, I am honored to have Christine Schockinger join us today on the show. Christine is an SEO consultant and a renowned author. She has more than 2 decades of experience in creating, developing, and maintaining websites in just about every industry, with a focus on technical SEO, site recovery, digital marketing strategies, and social media advertising. She's also an international speaker and has spoken at events like PubCon, SMX Advance, and South by Southwest. And if you're tuning into today's stream live, be sure to comment with questions for Christine. Maybe if there's an SEO problem you've been dealing with or something that you've been facing that you don't really quite know what you should do, maybe Christine can help you out. So Christine, it's great to have you on today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hi. How are you guys?
I'm
It's
great.
it's nice. We're having monsoon season in Las Vegas, so instead of 110, it's been under 100 all week. So I'm very happy.
Hey, that's good for Las Vegas. I was there a
Yeah,
few weeks
very.
ago, and I don't think it touched below 106. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's normal for this time of year. But fortunately, we've had a lot of rain. So
It's
I
good.
mean, for us, a lot of rain is a quarter of an inch, but
Yeah, yeah, exactly
yeah, yeah.
right. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, I know I went through a whole thing with your background, but there's more to you than that. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been working on lately?
So as far as SEO goes and websites and stuff, I've been working in them longer than I care to remember. But I started as a front end designer and developer, moved into accessibility, which is another skill set of mine, and then added SEO around 2005, 2006, and then have been working in that primarily since 2000, probably 11 or 12. I still do other things, but that's my main core business. And I do a lot of site recoveries. And so what I do is when people get manual actions or core update rolls out, I audit the site and then I help people get their traffic back. So I think that also gives me a lot of insight into how the algorithms work because you can't recover a site if you don't know what levers to push and which ones are the most important. So I do a lot of site auditing and then I do as a consultant, I'll do embedded roles where I just did a 2-year site migration, or I worked with Zappos internally for a year and a half to help them, boost their revenue and traffic, visibility and search. So it's kind of I go where the work takes me.
That's awesome.
But but I love site editing because I learn a lot from
Yeah,
site editing. Yeah.
and I think in today's day and age, that is becoming increasingly important for more and more businesses. I think maybe years ago, maybe 5, 10 years ago, there were only few businesses who felt like they really needed to optimize their website, and a lot of people or a lot of businesses were like, we don't really need that quite yet. But nowadays, it feels like it's absolutely crucial to have a website, a strong one, and to develop a rock solid online reputation. And one of the things that you mentioned was the site recovery and the Google algorithm updates. And that's something I want to touch on because for yourself as an expert in SEO and all of these things, you probably spend a lot of time reading, researching, and learning about Google search, how it works, the latest updates with the
Yeah.
algorithm, and how to use it to your advantage for your clients. So my first question for you today is kind of a high level one, and it's just, how does the Google search engine even work? How do we? I know
You have
that's
like 4 hours?
big question, yeah. But,
Yeah.
how does it know what website to populate when I search for a product or service? For example, if I were to just search something like chiropractor near me or chiropractor Austin, Texas, how does Google know what the best option is? How does that determine?
So, a couple things. First, don't put near me on a sign or change all your collaterals because Google's not looking for the words near me. It's doing what it does in local, which is doing like a search based, I mean, it's returning search based on the like distance from businesses, right? So you don't need to put near me. There's like this new trend you see in search. People show the photos like this business was put near me on all its signs. It's not, that's not helping you. They're not using near me. But basically in search, when it comes to your website, there's three things that are really important. One is your technical portion of your website. Can Google crawl your pages and index your pages properly? Are they getting everything they need? Are you in any violation of their technical standards like Core Web Vitals, which is how fast your page loads? If you're not meeting those, then the other things that you do are like swimming with 50-pound weights. You may have the most amazing content in the world, but your site technically can't be crawled well. So Google's not really giving you the visibility that you expect for the content that you're having. So then that's content is the next thing. Content is super important. You want to make sure your content is written well and knowledgeably, and it's written for your user intent so that you know if your users are looking for coffee cups, that you know your page is actually talking about coffee cups. You also want to have a depth and breadth on your site of content. So you don't want one page on coffee cups. You want to be like, coffee cups, and here's different kinds of coffee cups and why you use these coffee cups. And you want to create like an actual section of the site around the content you want to rank for, because Google's looking for depth and breadth, not just that you have one page with keywords on it. Because they're using machine learning now and they're looking for contextuality and something called super synonyms. So you could have a page on all the Marvel comic characters and never mention Marvel, and Google knows that's not Marvel. So if you wanted to rank for Marvel comic characters, you want a whole section on Marvel comic and Marvel comic characters, not just a page on it, and not just a portion of the page. Because Google is actually looking at portions of the page. So the content's about coffee cups, and they're like, how to wash coffee cups is like 2 lines at the bottom. They're not going to rank you on how to wash coffee cups. So content's really, really important. Something also to be to know is that there's this big thing about EAT. You hear EAT, EAT, EAT everywhere. Expertise, authority, trust, from the Quality Raters Guide. That term is only used for quality raters to have a conceptual understanding of what kind of sites Google wants to surface. So you don't need to pay $1,000 a page for an expert author, because Google's not looking at the expertise of the author. There's a misnomer out there about that. You do have to have it well written and knowledgeably written, because they can look at the words on the page called entities, which are just nouns, and they can tell if you're writing about the concept well. So, but that's a much lower cost per page. Right? You know, a knowledgeable writer who can write well, $100 a page. Expert author might cost you $1,000 a page. So don't fall into the trap of something like that. So good content, quality content, unique content, depth and breadth of content, and then also you want to make sure that it's just written well. And then the final thing, of course, is always off-site. You need to have people linking to you. There's myths out there that you can rank without links. Sure, if it's some obscure term, but in your local search, you're competitive, and so you're not going to rank well without any links. Don't buy links, because Google can tell that you purchase links. It won't hurt you usually anymore, but what it'll do is you'll spend all the money on the links and you'll go up a little bit, and then 2 months, 3 months later, when the algorithm runs through, you'll drop, and you'll drop because it devalued all the links you paid for. So the better ways are to do link attraction, like guides, white papers, press releases, do something in your community that people write about, and then link to your site. So ways that you can get focused on your business is pretty easy in smaller communities in towns. Because if you're a big national site, you got to get people to take interest in you nationally. But if you're local, there are a lot of easy ways. Sponsor something, be in an event, do a demo, do a guide, something like that, local guide. So those are all important. And then the other thing too, you have to look at is your page design, because Google does do page layout, but that's a little bit more complex than we have time for.
Interesting. It's wild to me that the thing that you mentioned about context and how you can talk you can write an entire article about Marvel characters and never use the word Marvel, and Google knows what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And that leads to one more thing I forgot. I'm sorry, not to, I just forgot though. Make sure your site has schema. So Google uses something called natural language understanding, which means it's going to your page and it's trying to understand what your page is about, right? Schema doesn't help you rank better, but it tells Google what your site's about, what your page is about. So if I wrote a recipe and I have, here's my recipe schema and the details, Google knows already this is a recipe, this is the timing. So that way that Google knows what that part of the page is about. And then there's certain things that get you into rich snippets where you get like stars for reviews, or you get into like local pack, not the map pack, but other local things that they're showing in rich snippets. So schema is really, really important. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on too long.
no, it's good. I mean, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy because I feel like that's, as you were talking about the updates to the algorithm and the changes that Google makes, and it kind of feels like it's just evolving and it's getting better at understanding what searchers are wanting and needing and looking for, and it's getting better at discerning between a quality source and a not so quality source, which is just really kind of amazing to kind of see because years ago, as you were saying earlier, it's like with keyword stuffing, people could just smash a bunch of keywords into the same article over and over and over again, and nowadays like Google immediately is like, no, that's not it. Like it's smart enough now to know that that's not the approach that they want their business is taking when it comes to ranking them. So I think it can go without saying that when it comes to maintaining your website, you should really focus on the things that Google finds important in regards to your search ranking. When Google crawls your site, as you mentioned, it looks for all of the things that you were just listing. But is there anything that stands out for, like, when you're writing an article or a blog, or you're thinking about adding onto your website a certain piece of content? Is there anything that people should keep in mind when when creating it, when posting it? As you were saying, you need to make sure you have schema and things like that. But is there anything that really stands out? Like, if you don't have this, it's not going. Like, what makes a website crawlable versus not crawlable?
Well, crawlable and content relevancy would be really different. So crawlable is like technical, right? There's certain things in the code that can make your page completely not crawlable. There's plugins that will add code to the top of your section. If you don't code, this makes no sense to you. But just think of your head here. And Google put your code puts all this information about your website in your head. And
Hmm.
if you put in certain third-party tags, they break that, and then Google doesn't see the rest of the information. So things like canonical tags won't be read. But when you're talking about content relevancy, sorry, back up a little bit, how to write content. So when you're writing content, you want to meet the user's need, right? So you want to make sure you use terms that the user would be looking for. You can find a lot of those in GSC, Google Search Console. You can use tools like Sitebulb, which is really cheap, inexpensive tool that will pull out keywords for up to a year. There's other ways to do APIs, but that's a simple, inexpensive way if you're a small business owner and don't know what an API is. You don't need to. You just connect your Google Search Console, tell you how long you want to go back. You can go back up to 16 months and then put in your branded terms. And it'll tell you your branded terms, it'll tell you your non-branded terms, mobile, desktop, all that. So you'll get a good idea of how people are searching for you. And then you want to kind of group those terms together to like core key terms. So if I was doing, one client I worked with once, they had nightshade vegetables and they're ranking for that. And then Google moved their query to nightshade vegetable list because it really was a list of nightshade vegetables. So they had to write a page about nightshade vegetables, generally speaking. So you want to make sure that you're very much meeting the query term that people are looking for. Well, don't say keywords because keywords are inquiries, but queries are now longer. The way Google's using machine learning to try to understand what you say on your page means that they're looking at the contextuality around your content. So if you're writing about something and you're using your query terms, what else are you talking about around that content? And then, so they look at like term relevance to each other in a page. Like I say, coffee and cups versus coffee here and cups down here, right? But don't optimize until after you've written. So let your writers just write, tell them what basically they're optimizing for so that they can be natural, so they can do their best writing, and then come in and optimize it. Because you can always optimize after someone's written, as long as they know the basic terms that they need to be writing for. You don't want to come in and say, write this like this, because then it stops the writer from being able to write well. And what
Hmm.
Google really wants is good content quality, because people forget that Google's product isn't Google search results. Google's product is the sites it turns back. So if you go to Google and you found all these horrible sites with horrible content, it was all keyword stuffed, well, then you wouldn't think Google was a good search engine.
Mhm.
So they want you to just make the content, well written, easy to read, but be also very clear in your content. So because Google's using machine learning, they're getting much more specific. So if your page is about 10 different things, Google won't know what the page is about and it won't meet the user intent. So you want to break it up. And that's what we talk about, hub pages, where you talk about it in general, and then subtopics, like pages on each item. And to go back, not to talk too long on this, but real quick, way back in the day, I don't know if this rumor or a real story, but this is what I was told, that Google would, when people went to make Google, they went to a library and they found out that the library already organized the world's information. They didn't need to reinvent the wheel. So for anybody who's old enough to remember a card catalog, your search results are the card catalog, right? Your title is there, your description, and the Dewey Decimal numbers, your URL goes to your website. Your website's a book. So do you have a good table of contents? That's your navigation. Do you have it ranged well by topic? That's your sections, right? And then your subtopics are the subchapters you would have in a book. So is your site a good book? Does it read like a good book to Google? Or is it just scattered stuff and long pages that don't make sense and aren't relevant to each other? Then you're not going to do as well.
Wow, that's a great metaphor, or just an example of how to, you can look at your website and think of it like a book, because it totally makes sense. As just a normal user, when you're going through a website, it should be intuitive, and
Yeah.
you should be able to naturally be able to find the menu and the products for sale or more resources, or it should be a natural thing, like, for a normal user to use. And I think that's something to keep in mind. And I also liked what you said about how, when creating content or writing, don't write to optimize, SEO or anything like that.
Yep.
Just write the way you do and you can optimize later. And
Yep.
I think, keeping that in mind will help keep your content clean and uh, just well written. When you're not focusing on things that don't relate to writing, that could affect it. So I think that's a great thought. So I want to touch on website ranking and the factors that apply to that. And so obviously your website is a big factor of that. But also there's things like your Google Business Profile, reviews, like you said, the offsite links, things like that. And in the Google search results, the golden real estate is that local three pack that you had briefly touched on. um, Having your Google Business Profile rank in that local three pack can massively impact your website traffic and your visibility. So, if you're able to kind of break it down, is there a way for you to know how much of your ranking is determined by your Google Business Profile versus your website? I'm assuming you'd want both of those to work in tandem together. What does that relationship between those two look like? And, for example, if, let's say, you didn't have a website and you only had a Google Business Profile, or vice versa, if you had no Google Business Profile but you had a website, what would your ranking kind of look like? Would you still be able to rank in a certain, that first page? What's the relationship between the non-website stuff and the website stuff when it comes to ranking?
Well, you want to make sure, first of all, that you always have your own website, right? Because you don't want Google to control your business. So if you get your I know it's not GMB anymore. I keep saying GMB, but if you get suspended, then you lose your presence, right? And there are easy ways to get suspended, especially when you're a novice to using their system. So you want to do both. You want to make sure you have both. You have a nice website. Website can be small. You don't have to invest $10,000 in a website. You can get a WordPress developer locally for, usually 1,000, 2,000 to put a site together for you. So you want to do that. And then, of course, there's ways that you work with, I keep saying G. I'm just going to say GMB. I keep forgetting the other acronym.
Yeah,
Uh,
GBP doesn't quite roll off the
it
tongue.
doesn't, right? It's like, bleh. So GMB, there are ways, that you rank well with that. You need to make sure, the three things they look at is prominence, relevance, and oh gosh, what is the other one? Prominence, relevance. Why can't I remember it? But you want to make sure you look at those. There's relevance, distance. Sorry, of course, distance, prominence. So prominence is like, on your profiles, are people mentioning you in town? Are you mentioned on social? Are you're written about? And those go back to attracting links too, right? Though, so that's kind of a combination. You do that for your website, and Google's gonna notice that your distance from people when they search. There's nothing really you can do about that. You can try to game it, but if you get caught, you're gonna get suspended. Things like your name, address, profile, your your location, your services. If you get suspended, the only way you get it back is if you can prove documentation wise that you do really do these things, you really are at that location. So it's not really good to try to game it because you just hurt yourself in the end. And once you're suspended, you may never get it back. So you want to be careful about that. The stuff for the website we talked about is all the stuff I already talked about, indexing, content, quality, links, things like that. The great thing is if you're doing both, you can get double listing. You can get your website listed and you can get your GMP profile listed. So you have two listings on the same page for like your brand name. So it gives you more space because they're separate. They're separate to Google. They're not the same thing. You can't get, well, you sometimes can, but rarely can get two of your own pages on page one. Google doesn't do that anymore unless they do a sub-index, like indent on one page, but they won't give you 2-3 listings like they used to. But by having your GMB profile, you can get both listings. And I will say, as a local business, I love those profiles because I go and look at them for like how for information about that company specifically, especially when I'm booking reservations or I'm looking for something, an event or something like that. Those are very important. So I'd say it's just really important to have both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we received a question from the audience, and I think it's a really good one, and it relates to some of the qualities of a website that you were talking about earlier. And they asked, so what about a well-crafted single-page site versus a multi-page site? Is there a hit for the number of pages on a website? What is
There's
that?
it, so Google doesn't say like, oh, you'll have 10 pages, that matters, or you have 20 pages, but single page sites can, but not, they don't really compete usually. You really need to have, things that show Google that you're a business, privacy policy, an about page, a contact page, and then information about your site, about your company, your services, things like that. A single page puts all that information on one, so Google can't really discern what the page is about because everything's kind of like taking like everything from a can, 5 cans and putting it in one bowl. You made something at the end. Can you tell what it is? Versus, I put tomato soup and I put mushroom soup over there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we got another question, and it relates perfectly into what I wanted to talk to you about here in a second. And so I'll go ahead and ask you that. And they're asking, what does the latest Google algorithm have to say about long form content, like pillar pages with more than 10,000 words versus short form content and blogs that are less than 1,500 words?
So there's no Google. You have to have 200 words. You have to have 500. You can't have 10,000. But when you get to 10,000 words, how clear are you being about what you're writing about, right? Shouldn't you break that down into sub pages, a hub of pages, and then different pages off that about that topic, or paginated or something? So basically, having 10,000 words is a lot of irrelevancy for Google to focus on. Also, I don't remember if this is factual or just what other SEOs have said, but there does seem to be a limit that once you get past about 3,500 words, Google gets tired and is like, I'm kind of done with this page. Also, on short content, it's not that you have, I always say, like, when they're writing blogs or something, make it 500 words or more. Not because Google says you have to have 500 words, but you do have to give it enough content for Google to understand what you're writing about, the relevancy of what you're writing about. And generally, if you're under 500 words, you don't have a lot of relevancy in there. You just don't have enough information for Google to really assess what the page is about. So you want to make sure that it meets the need of the user, meets the need of the topic. So don't force yourself to write 1,000 words if it really is just a 500-word blog. But if you've written 200 words, there's probably a little bit more you can put into there to make it more fleshed out topic.
So yeah, so not going overboard with over 10,000 to where it's almost redundant, and it might just be kind of repetitive or just not getting to the point. And also not going the opposite way where you don't have any information and there isn't enough context for Google to really understand what you're talking about. So finding that balance in between. And it's funny that you mentioned the book thing because now that's all I think about now. Like ever since you mentioned it, because I was thinking, okay, well, yeah, if you have over 10,000 words, that's like a chapter of a book that's way too long that can be broken down in different sections. So now I'm going to be thinking about that all day. So
usually if you've gotten past H4 in something you're writing, like the H1, 2, 3, 4, once you get to the fourth header, if you're putting 5, 6, and 7, you probably have topics are mixed and you could create separate pages because Google really likes that clarity of topic. This page is about books and I'm writing about these books, not I'm writing about every book in the world, unless it's the hub page, which then you can put the sub pages underneath.
That's awesome. Cool. That's a really good tip to remember. Hopefully, people are tuning in and paying attention because you're dropping knowledge left and right here. So clearly, there are a lot of factors that go into ranking high on Google, from your
Mhm.
website, your Google business profile, and all of the other things that we've talked about so far. In addition to all of these factors, Google is constantly changing and updating, and it feels like as soon as you seem to get something right, it changes, and you have to figure it out again tomorrow. So, how do you keep up with these changes? Is there anything that you can do or businesses can do to be prepared for these changes so that they don't fall behind or lose their ranking or, hurt themselves in any way?
Well, one, I would say follow John Mueller and Martin Split and Rusty Brick on Twitter if you're in Twitter, or follow um, follow them on their on Google stuff. Like there's off the record from Google that the three main Google reps for people who have websites talk about search. So that's a really good way. But on changes themselves, Google usually announces big changes a long way ahead. So
Mm,
as long as you're keeping up with SEO news, and Barry Schwartz, Rusty Brick, is really the best one to do that. He confirms everything that he writes with Google, so you're not going to get misinformation there. Because there are other people that like throw a lot of opinion in, and it may be right or it may not be, but Barry doesn't do that. And so Google announced them ahead of time. But when it comes to things like core updates, that's all the core ranking signals that Google has. Is go to Google's basic SEO guides. They have several of them. Read them and know what they say. Know what the webmaster tools say. Because when they say like we're going to do the core update, they've written a document about it, right? We're going to do the Core Web Vital update. They've written documents about this, so you can actually go. And sadly, Google is terrible at search. So if you look for something like CWVs, put Google Developer Docs after it, and you'll see Google Developer Docs come up, and they write these so that people can learn about their website. Now, it may be above your head what to do there, but at least you'll know, because then if you hire somebody, you'll know that they know what they're talking about. So I always, even if you're a site owner, you're like, I have no idea what any of this means, that's okay. Just read the documents so you know someone's telling you stuff that's like bogus, right? The best thing though a small business can do is once a year get a paid audit. It used to, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be deductible on your taxes to do a SEO audit once a year, and get someone outside your organization to review your site. Make sure they're a real auditor, like someone like me who goes through and looks at everything, writes it up, doesn't give you a tools report from like SEMrush or something. But then they can help you identify any potential issues so that when the updates come out, then you're pretty protected. And that person will also inform you if you talk to them a couple times a year of Google changes that are coming up. And that's usually the best way because SEO is so hard to keep up with
mhm.
if you're not living in the space, because it's just every day, as you know, it can be set change every single day. So it's good to have an SEO that you can talk to every now and then. Just hire them for a few hours just to update you on what's going on Google 3 times or 4 times a year.
It's interesting. It's funny, the webinar that I was in last month with Ben and Steve, Ben also mentioned a couple of those names that you mentioned, and Twitter. It feels like Twitter is the home for the SEO world. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. LinkedIn too, but LinkedIn's harder because you have to know people. Twitter, John Mueller answers questions almost every day on Twitter, or you'll see Barry Schwartz or Rusty Brick will tell you like where they're going to have the hangout so you can watch John talk, summarize the hangout, tell you what he said, anything important that comes up, he'll summarize in his blog. If Twitter's not for you, that's okay. If you follow someone like Barry Schwartz on his actual blogs postings, then he can help you like wade through what's going on.
awesome. Yeah, and like you said, it can be definitely difficult to follow SEO if you're not just breathing it in every day.
Yeah.
So, using those avenues to keep up with it, even if it, like you said, it goes over your head, just being familiar with it. So when you do talk to that SEO person who's helping you with your audit, which is actually, conducting that website audit, the SEO audit is anytime, every webinar I've had with Steve Wiedemann, and I think we've had 4 in the past year. The first bit of advice he always says is exactly what you said: do an audit, get an understanding of where you currently are so that you can make a plan to get where you want to be.
Exactly.
And it's and you know and that, I think that's something that cannot be understated enough. I think so many people just jump into it. They're like, okay, now what do I do? Like, where are we at? And they just kind of go into it without really understanding where they are. And so, kind of following within that, looking ahead, do you have any predictions for the world of SEO and Google search? In other words, do you see a specific direction that Google is heading? Have the updates, obviously this is such a big thing and there's so much that goes on. It's hard to probably notice a pattern or a trend. But an example would be like, Google starting to understand context and relevancy, and not necessarily needing an expert author, but wanting the article itself to be well written, with with some expertise in it. Is there anything that you're seeing maybe in the future that people should start thinking about when it comes to their websites in Google or Google search?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. They're going to keep adding machine learning. So machine learning requires that you be very precise and specific in your content, in your site architecture, in your clues that you give Google what your pages are about. Also, they've been talking about something about value. So a lot of people have noticed in the last 6 months that they're not getting their pages indexed in Google. Like they'll have half of their pages not indexed in Google's. There's no technical issue. There's no crawl issue. No issue there. And John has used the word value sometimes. Is your site valuable? So your site doesn't have to be just good anymore. It doesn't just have to be relevant. It has to be valuable. So are you providing information, deeper information, broader information, information only you know because you do this for a business that others aren't offering on their website? Good place to do this for a small business is like a blog, or to have articles, or to do white papers, depending on what your business is. But Google adding value means we have everything we need in the document corpus that we need to pull documents from. So they didn't used to, now they do. So now is your site not just matching user query, but do we think you have extra value in addition to just matching the user query? So it's a step up. They haven't told us what they mean by that yet. They haven't told us the definition, but I'm going to say that's probably the next direction that they're going. Is your site valuable to them? Yeah. Think of it, they have a trillion pages, over a trillion pages. So they have 100,000 pages on like, how to make coffee. Well, why pull your page? Well, your quality has got to be good and your technical has to be good. Okay, that's a big part of it. But now you're down to 5,000 pages. So why pull your page over the other people? And also, again, links are a big part of that too. I mean, Google would like to pretend that you don't need links, and they'll tell you don't need links, but they're lying. You need links to your site. So, but one local good like newspaper link who wrote a story on you is worth 1,000 of the credit links you'd get by paying somebody.
Interesting. Yeah.
All links aren't the same.
Yeah, and the way I think about it is the thing that Google cares about is their users. And so whenever they're providing results to their users, they want those to be the best results because that's what keeps their users trusting them. And that's what matters to them. But in order to do that, you need to develop, as a business, you need to develop trust with Google so they trust you to present your business to their users. And
Exactly.
so to me, I've always thought of it like you just like finding a way to develop and build that trust with Google, whether it be with your content, with your online reputation and your presence, and being able, to have Google trust you enough to put you in front of their users, which is what they care about.
Exactly. That's exactly what they're doing. So yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Well, hopefully, some of the things that we've covered today will help some people understand how Google search works and maybe even help them improve their ranking and improve their online presence. Um, I think in the comments, yes, in the comments, we just posted a link to the Birdeye SEO checklist. In that, you'll find things like a 6-point checklist to help improve search rankings, location data, and local website criteria needed to be seen by search engines, Google Business Profile tips, and tips to just help fuel your SEO strategy. It's a really cool checklist. You can print it out and you can use it as you follow along when you're conducting your own website audit. So be sure to check that out, and then also be sure to check out the recording with Steve and Ben and I, where we were able to really dive into Google Business Profiles and how to make those work for you. Christine, thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to talking to you again soon. I do believe that we're working on a webinar for later this year, where we're going to be diving into all sorts of awesome stuff. So I'm excited for that.
Cool.
Cool.
I'm I can't talk. Thank you for having me today. It was a lot of fun, so I appreciate it, and hopefully it was helpful for your viewers. So.
Definitely, I think it is. I mean, we've gotten some awesome comments and some great questions, which is something that The live streaming is still new to us. We're still trying to figure it out as we go, but it's been an absolute blast. For more on taking your local business digital, check out birdeye.com, watch a free demo, download a guide, talk to one of our awesome people here. And we'll try to, do our best to help you take your website and your online presence and your customer experience as a whole to a new level, whether it be through reviews, your listings, your Google business profiles, things like that. So I think that's all the time we have for today, Christine. So I'll go ahead and let you go. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.